Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Lunch Out Loud. I'm Simo, and I am here today in the flesh, live in person with Jaz, and we are doing our live podcast. We do this every Tuesday, where we get to be able to interact with you guys who are participating in this podcast. There's a whole bunch of people who download this podcast. If you miss it, or if you want to share it, you can just hit share or like on this now. Or you can also let people know that they can download these anytime off. All they've got to do is search Simo Hoffman on any of their podcasting channels. They'll be able to find it right there. And today we are talking about when you're just over leaders. I don't know if you've ever been like that, where you're just like, you're dealing with leaders and you are over it. But this is going to be a good topic. We do this, and the idea of this is we try and work out what the Bible says about it. We try and work out how we actually live it. And then we actually try and do it as like a discipleship time where we get to sort of iron each other out a little bit. But we try and make it pretty confrontational and try and make it pretty honest as well. Jaz, how's your week been? And are you ready for this topic?
I am, yes. Are you?
I'm concerned. I think you brought it up because it's about me. I think you've got issues with me that you want to air publicly, and I thought it would have been preferable to do it in private, but here we go. We're going to do it publicly. Issues with leaders in your life, without maybe saying their exact name in case it's me. Tell me some of the issues you've had with leaders in the past, and why did you want to talk about this today? Like, how did this even come about?
Like most good ideas I have, I think it was the Lord. Because I was actually like, oh, what should we talk about? Like, what's an issue that people might be challenged by? And I know that one thing that I've been really aware of is that a lot of people will say that they've walked away from the Lord or walked away from church because they've said, my leadership really hurt me. My leadership really disappointed me. How am I meant to follow someone who is so flawed or who's let me down so much? Which, I've definitely felt disappointed with a lot of leadership in the past, either my personal leadership or leadership of like my overall like church that I attend. Or
but you attend my church.
Is that the overall church?
Okay.
No, or just like we see a lot of Christian leaders as well that we're like passionate followers of them, like, great, love being discipled by the things that they put out, and then like, oh, what did they just say? What did they just do? Can I trust anything from them? Are they actually legit? Has everything they've ever said actually a lie? Like, how do we deal with that? How do you deal with that?
Yeah, and there's been a few of those. Even if you take out the church context, what about workplaces? Like, even in your workplace or even in government, like, I think even now it's really interesting watching people's reaction to different government decisions. Since the introduction of social media, people's opinions around our government are all of a sudden very public and very aired and very shareable. And now all of a sudden, I suppose there's a greater level of distrust towards leadership in general anyway. So how do we resolve it? Like, what's your thoughts around this? Like, what are you actually wanting to sort of talk about and get through today?
Yeah, I think maybe just talking through like the different thoughts that we'll have when we are disappointed. As people, we do deal with a lot of hurts in our lives that often come from disappointments, and it seems like the most the more painful disappointments that we have in our lives are often from hurts of people that we trusted, disappointing us, letting us down, and just the fact that so many people are affected by their faith is affected by these things. And even their ability to, do what they're meant to do in their society, in their workplaces, because suddenly, I don't agree with what my leader just did, or actually my leader literally just showed me that even though I've been so loyal and a hard worker for all these years, was it worth it?
Okay, so start us off. I'm going to hand you the steering wheel today, Jaz. You can ask the questions.
Okay.
If they're questions that we've spoken about before, and I'll click them up and we'll get them up there.
Yeah.
But also, you who are watching and listening, don't forget you can engage with us at any time. You can ask questions. Maybe you specifically want to talk about a leader that's hurt you or done something wrong, how you should respond to that. Maybe it's even about something that's going on in politics right now. Dare I say it? We'll do our best to actually answer it. I'm going to put it out there. I don't agree with every decision any politician has made. I grew up voting one way, which was pretty much Labor. In Australia, it's like a bit of a left-wing party. And then in recent years, I would say I'm one of those swing voters, because it's really hard to decide who to vote for anymore when you disagree with both sides, really. It doesn't seem like there's a really positive alternative. I know in America there's a lot of Trump lovers and there's a lot of Trump haters and a lot of Biden lovers and Biden haters. And the truth is, if you look at either of them, you're going to find their faults. And so the question is, and how to respond accordingly. So, Jaz, steering wheel's over to you. I'm going to let you ask me any questions you want today about leadership and about, what I've done, what I haven't done, all of those different things.
Okay. I think like maybe a good place to start might be if you are someone who has heard someone in your world who's meant to be in a place of leadership say something that you don't agree with, like, how do we deal with like just a disagreement? This is just disagreement, not disappointment. Can
you give us an example?
Yeah. Okay. So I, as a person of color, have always been really aware of the issues that people of color face. And I know a lot of people don't think that it's a thing. I've heard people literally say to me that, oh, no, all of those, like, systemic racism and oppression is just a construct by the left wings. And I'm like, okay, you're someone who's literally never experienced that.
Sure.
So you don't, like, of course you wouldn't believe it. So I guess, like, as a person of color, hearing
if leaders are saying that,
leadership over me saying that an issue that I'm dealing with makes me feel that, they actually don't fully care about me as fully as a person. They only care about certain aspects of me. How do I follow that? How do I follow someone who, a good example is in the church world, if our pastors do say something that we then go, oh, they don't actually care about me as a full person. How are we then meant to follow them if they've actually been placed in leadership and we've chosen them as leadership because, you choose what church you want to go to. How do we keep following people where we're like,
Okay, I think you've raised up a couple of really good thoughts there, and I'm going to try not to be like one of those defensive leaders. I'm going to try and be brutally honest. First and foremost, you can't look to your leader to be everything. That's the first thing that I'd say. And the same with your boss, and it's the same with your government. Your government is not the answer to every single problem that you have. And I hate to say this, but your government doesn't actually consider you anything more than just being a number. And so ultimately, they've got a whole nation to consider. You're one of those many. And it's the same in every aspect. Same with your workplace. It's the same with your church. As much as we'd like to think that our church leaders or our pastors are there to care for and cater for our every need, that's just not the case. There's just not enough of us to go around. As a pastor, I can unequivocally say that. And I know that as hard as that is to actually see sometimes, maybe one of the issues that we have here is our expectation on our leaders. Do we expect them to be able to provide answers for us on everything? Now, the second thing you brought up there is when they are not in alignment with a particular area in your life. So then there's one or two things that are possible here. One of the possibilities is that maybe God's brought you on to actually expose a blind spot to them. So then it comes to how do we expose that blind spot to them. In my experience, having been in the same situation that you're talking about there, Jaz, the way that we expose the blind spot needs to start, in a Christian sense, and because we're both Christians, needs to start with prayer. Like if we're not actually starting to go, God, would you reveal it to this person? Would you soften the person's heart? No matter how much evidence and facts that you bring to that person, it's a blind spot. And so it's almost like have you in like racehorses, how they have the blinkers on that allow them to focus forward? Yeah. It's almost trying to say to that racehorse, but there's something outside your blinkers. It's beyond their recollection. It's beyond what they can see. And so the first thing you need to do is work out how you can turn their head to be able to see what it is that you're seeing. And to do that, you need the rider to be able to do that. You're not the one riding the horse. It should be, in a Christian sense, it should be God who begins to turn their head. Yeah. You can hold it up for them. You can be the advocate for that thing for them. But at the end of the day, people need to choose for themselves what they're actually going to what they're actually going to believe as well. So it does make it difficult. How do you continue to follow them? How do you continue to trust them? You've got to decide as the overall picture, everything that actually entails in their leadership, and whether their entire leadership is in question or whether it's just one blind spot. Because at the same time, you might have this particular bench over here where you're like, yeah, but this is a very important issue. What is the most important issue for any leader to face? Like, do you know what I mean? Like, there's 1,000 issues that a leader could choose to face. At the end of the day, their job isn't to fight your fight. Their job is to encourage you to fight your fight and strengthen you and teach you and train you and equip you. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So to give you methods and methodology.
Yeah. Yeah. So then I guess going off that, if we are people who are then meant to be joining, I guess, like into ministries and then out working it, so then now we've got a good relationship with our leaders, working with them together, they're doing what they need to do, allowing you and empowering you to do what you need to do. What about when they actually really deeply disappoint you and let you down? Like maybe they broke promises, maybe you've found out, maybe they have, as a leader, but still a human, fallen short of...
Good example, just recent one, Carl Lentz.
Yes.
Is that the one you're thinking of?
It is the one I was thinking
of. Yeah. I think most people, it's pretty public. It's not like it's private information. You can look up what happened with Carl, pastor of Hillsong in New York, who recently lost his job, came out and let people know that it was because he had an extramarital affair. So that's tough. That was a tough one for a lot of people to deal with.
And he wasn't the first one either.
Like,
no. The first time
lots
it's ever
have happened.
Yeah.
And
so many people will say that, oh, you know, these are people who are meant to be leading us, but like they can't even like do what they're meant to do. So I guess like, how do you deal with disappointment from your leader?
Sure. Well, this comes down to this one here that you were talking about before. Do leaders have to stick to higher standards?
Yeah.
What people who are watching, if you are listening, do you think that leaders need to have and be held to a higher standard than others? What are your thoughts, Jaz? Be honest, be brutal in this.
You know what? I've always kind of struggled with this because I have been around church like my whole life, and so I've seen how people progress into leadership. I see the kinds of people I've been involved in different churches as well. I've seen the kinds of people that have been put into leadership positions. I've seen different journeys and different ways that different churches facilitate into that leadership. And then I've seen different leadership or people in positions of leadership where they have fallen. And so it's really quite interesting. I think that people are in leadership should be sticking to higher standards because they're meant to be an example for us. They're meant to be showing other people this is how we do it. That's what leader and leadership means. It means showing, being there to empower people to do that. And part of that empowerment is through example.
Yep.
But then I think a lot of the time I've seen where people have been put into leadership positions where there is that higher standard, but that higher standard also comes with a higher character. And so I've seen people placed into those positions without having the character to match that. Where they're still quite young or immature, maybe they do have a lot of great leadership skills, you know, great speaker, can get people to follow them, can empower people, but haven't had that sense of, well, I guess not sense that.
But either way, you're still sort of saying that they have to be held to a higher standard, right?
Yeah.
But why do they have to be held to a higher standard? Why do you hold them to a higher standard than what you hold yourself to?
Myself, I have high standards too. But I guess it is literally just because we are meant to be examples in leadership positions.
But what does that mean though? Like, if that's just so, here's my thing. I absolutely think they should be held to a higher standard, but I think that they should be held to the standard where it's like the best version of me is what I want my leaders to look like.
Yeah.
Me on my best day is what I want my leaders to look like.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? It's like, what I think happens sometimes though is we expect our leaders to carry our standard for us, rather than actually achieving that standard for ourselves.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So we kind of go, I think a leader should have to do this, this, and this. It's like, okay, but are you doing that yourself?
Yeah.
Because the best version of you is what your leaders should be. And yes, they're going to have their bad days, all of that sort of stuff. But they absolutely should be held to a higher standard.
Yeah.
There's no question about that. However, you're right. That actually is a character standard, not a works standard.
Yeah.
And sometimes when we legalize or we put the written down standards on it, we can sometimes forget that those standards are actually about a person's heart and about a person's character. And so it's the same thing that we would say for ourselves. Our character, our heart needs to be aiming for that standard, because a leader should be leading us into that standard.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
What are your thoughts? Do you agree or?
Yeah, like it is. I do like that. Like it's the best that they like on our best day. I do agree with that. Yeah, like it's kind of that. This is what I would want to be. So I guess maybe that's why it can be really painful and hurtful when a leader then suddenly makes a mistake, which is human, because you're like, oh, I was aspiring to be you. Like I had these really, really high aspirations, and now that's been crushed. I've been disappointed.
How did you feel about everything that happened with Carl Lentz?
I didn't have too many feelings about it. Like I said, like I've seen a lot of leaders fall over the
But did
years.
it remind you of those leaders that have fallen, and did it make you sort of go, geez, there goes another one? Or what were your thoughts?
No, I think it was just like, oh, that's really sad that obviously someone has had to experience like something in their life where this has gone wrong. And then also, thinking about the family and like, okay, that's also a really good reminder that, hey, sometimes sometimes the things most times our actions actually have consequences for other people. So it was also quite sad as well. But it did get me thinking, like, how would a church like Hillsong then work with someone who's been in such a prominent position? How would they work with them to then process what's happened?
Oh, for sure. I suppose that's a hard thing, is this one was happened so publicly, so the impact and the effect was so much wider. But like you say, this happens in churches more frequently than what we'd like to admit. And to me, it probably comes down to the reality. You asked this question before about how we actually keep leaders accountable. So we have this leadership standard that sometimes is made up, but ultimately it comes down to a character. And then what we need to be asking ourselves is, how are we actually helping maintain that leader's character? And I think that comes down to, as weird as it sounds, and I hadn't thought about it until this moment, it actually relates to what you were saying before, Jaz, when you're like, but if my leader doesn't see this particular thing, how do I get them to see what my suffering is and what my da-da-da-da-da-da? Actually, what we need to be doing is saying, well, my leader may not see it, but I'm going to fight that fight. I'm going to do it well, because my leader's teaching me how to do it. They've empowered me to do it, and I'm going to be released to do it. I'm not going to expect them to be the answer to every single problem that our world is facing. I'm going to let them be the example of what godly character looks like, and I'm going to translate what they're doing in their world and their circumstances into mine. And so now when I'm facing the issue of racism and systemic racism, I'm not looking for my leader to be the answer to that. I'm looking for me to be the answer, and I'm using the character example that leader's set to be the standard that I live by in my particular field.
Yeah.
And then we are holding our leaders accountable, not to doing every task, but we're holding our leaders accountable to maintaining godly character.
Yeah.
And we're giving them the space, and we're giving them the ability to be able to engage in actually taking on godly character.
Yeah. So going off that, what you're saying, I guess is another question of, can our leaders actually be wrong, even if they're, even if we are holding them to that a certain standard and to a certain character?
Sure.
But can they still be wrong? Like, if you're in leadership, can you afford to be wrong?
Yeah. I think that absolutely. Like, I've been wrong so many times that I can't even count. I think it comes down to how you are being wrong. Is that what comes down to it? So, I mean, the reality is you've been wrong before too, Jaz. Rarely, but there was that one occasion which started on 1995 and is still going till today. So, but we're all wrong at different occasions. We're all wrong at different times. It's not a matter of whether we're wrong. It's a matter of how we handle it. It's a matter of how we respond when we make a mistake. We had somebody who commented. I'm not sure if the whole comment is going to show up, and I apologize if I mispronounce your name, but I think it's Shalom or Shalom, where she suggests that there's a bigger conversation of where we're putting leaders on a pedestal, and if there's enough quality support around leaders. I absolutely agree with that, and I think that's what we're trying to suggest, is that we can't put leaders on the pedestal of we're expecting you to be perfect in every area. What we're saying is you've actually got to fight for that godly character, and our job as people who are following those leaders is to give them space, is to give them area where they can do that, and they can do that well. We've got to allow leaders to develop that character, because it's a continual process. Obviously it goes without saying that I'm not a perfect leader. I don't laugh, Chaz. It was hurtful when you laugh. Like, yeah, clearly. One of the things that I try very, very hard and very frequently to do is actually to do that, is to go, God, how do I find my character and be godly character? And the greatest compliment that people have ever given me is when they've spent time with me away from the pulpit, when they've spent time with me away from leadership, and they go, you're exactly the same. Like, you are the same guy, whether you're at home, whether you're meeting up with me for a coffee, whether you're preaching from a pulpit, you are literally the same guy. To me, that shows consistency of character, and that I'm not putting on a show to be able to draw people's attention to, this is what you should do. It's just who I am. And I think leadership is being released into who you are, and to do that well. So can I be wrong in life? Yes, I can. That means I'm going to be wrong in my leadership decisions. And that means that as I make those mistakes, I always think about, this is going to make me a better leader in 10 years' time. Is that this mistake is 10 years' time's story and teaching point. That I'll teach on this, and I'll preach from this, and that this mistake that I've made now is something that is actually a lesson for the future. I don't know if you remember, I've got this old saying that I use that all the time, that the only failure is to fail to learn.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's just a lesson.
Yeah.
So if I fail to learn from it, I'm failing.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I'm just moving forward. It is just another lesson. So, yeah, leaders can be wrong. We're wrong all the time. It's how we do it.
So then, if you're in a situation where you've had a leader that's wrong, or you feel has been wrong, or maybe disappointed you or hurt you, what, I guess, I don't know if you want me to answer this or if you want to answer it, but I guess, like, what's a good process to then reconciling with them, like, talking it through, processing that, and then continuing on? Or is there a point where we actually go, you literally just said that, like, Jesus was actually not part of the Trinity, so that's actually theologically wrong, and that's actually something we can't, like,
totally right.
Maybe I shouldn't attend this church anymore because you're wrong. Or maybe, maybe
I need to leave this workplace because they're making ethical or moral decisions that I disagree with. Maybe you're one of those people who morally and ethically are like, we have to use organic products, we have to use fair trade products, or at least ethically sourced products. And all of a sudden you realize the organization you're working for doesn't care about that. And then that you're supporting that organization, you're essentially literally you're not putting your money where your mouth is. And so there's ethical decisions that people have to make. So you're asking,
what's a good process to broach the topic, chat it through with your leadership, and what are some good responses, or, like, what are some red flags from that conversation?
Great question. Would really like some comments from people here who have confronted their leaders and they've confronted their leaders about a particular issue, and it's gone badly or it's gone well. Okay, so I've had the occasions where I've done both. Number one rule is don't speak on behalf of anyone else. The worst thing that you can do, and I made this mistake, is go to a leader and say, everybody feels this way. We've all been talking. Straight away, you've already put yourself in a position of actual confrontation there, where you're saying, I've taken on a pseudo leadership role. So I've gathered the allies of mine, and I'm coming to you now not just as me. I'm coming to you as a representative of our union that's standing against you. It's just like craziness. So number one, speak on behalf of yourself. Number two, be willing to be wrong for yourself. So go into the conversation with the expectation, geez, I hope I'm wrong, particularly if it's a moral or ethical thing that the person you're speaking to is you're having to confront them about. Number three, I think, is as you're going into that, make sure that you, again, as a Christian, I've got to go in with prayer. So I'm praying, God, help them be the one that brings this up. then I'll know that I'm the one who's actually got to confront them about an issue. I remember doing this with one leader on an occasion, and I asked, and I've been praying, Lord, and people had been coming to me. So I was like, hey, you got to go and speak to the leader yourself, go and speak to the leader yourself. It got to the point where I was like, I'm going to have to speak to this leader. I just prayed, God, if I'm the one that's to speak to them about this, you'll get them to bring it up. Lo and behold, the next day, the person asked me the exact thing that we were talking about. So it all of a sudden, I realized I was the one to bring it up. So I spoke about it with them. They didn't really want to hear it. So I just listened and said, hey, at the end of the day, I'm okay to be wrong, but you need to do it between you and God. Like this was a pastor leader that I was talking to. So you need to deal with it between you and God. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. That's okay. I'll take that. However, if you're wrong and you're not willing to deal with it, it's going to be much worse for you, because I can move on from this knowing I fulfill my obligation. Couple of red flags is, again, if there's moral or ethical choices in there that are just against what you stand for, then that's where you've got to have the courage to potentially walk away. What about you? What have you done in the past that's worked?
So last year, I came to you and Lisa, and I said, guys, I'm really struggling, and I feel like I haven't received the support I've needed from you guys, which, was real. I got really, really bad coming in, even talking to you guys, because in my head I was like, well, Jasmine, they're not meant to be like doing everything for you. They're not meant to be checking up on you every single day. But then, like, you guys are really good. You were like, hey, you guys like apologized and said, we're really sorry that we hadn't noticed, and that you felt this way, which I really appreciated. So thank you. But yeah, then just like following up from that, like you guys actually asked, like, what did I feel like I needed in that situation? How you guys could actually then work with me in that. And so that was really, encouraging, I guess. From that, there's been other situations where I've gone to leadership and I've said, hey, this is actually an issue. And they said, it's not. And I'm like, okay, let me rephrase this. I feel like the detrimental issues happening because of this. And they're like, well, if you feel that way, maybe you can deal with it. But then, like, even in that empowerment, and I say in quotation marks, I wasn't given the support I needed from that. So that was disappointing. But I guess, like, for me personally, even if leaders disappoint me, and then I bring it up and they don't really do anything about it, I'm learning that I shouldn't have expectations that everyone be perfect and do everything according to how I think. Sometimes people are going to mess up because we're human. Sometimes they will be willfully ignorant or willfully unkind or willfully just, well, I don't really care. And then it's like you said, like, okay, well, then that's up to you. If you don't want to deal with what I'm bringing up to you, then it's actually not good. But that's on you as a leader. And then just trying to make sure that, okay, just because someone else isn't having integrity, I've got to make sure I've got integrity. So I think, like, I guess as a person who's experienced a lot of disappointment and a lot of challenges with leadership above me, that's probably like my number one thing for anyone. Like, keep your integrity. Don't speak out against that leader.
100%.
Even if they're doing the wrong thing, they're still a place of authority. So they can be called up on it, but don't gossip. Don't criticize.
Which is hard to do, to be honest with you.
Oh, yeah.
Because sometimes we go, I'm just venting.
Yeah.
I just needed to vent.
Yeah.
I'm really sorry. I just needed to tell somebody.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, just go and talk to them about it.
Yeah.
And the other thing as well, like you said it before, is, keep yourself right. And I always say, keep your hands and your heart clean and pure. At the end of the day, you've got to go keep your hands and heart clean and pure. I remember I had this conversation with a guy by the name of Chick Yule one time. He was a pastor from the UK, and he was out doing a conference, and I had the opportunity to kind of chat to him one-on-one. And he had just gone through a really messy confrontation with some, really significant leaders in the church in the UK. And I remember he said to me, he used to pray this prayer, God, either change my heart or change their heart, move them or move me. That's it.
Yeah.
Sometimes it comes down to that you've actually got to go change their heart or change my heart. Maybe I'm in the wrong here. Change my heart, God. Change their heart, move me or move them.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, you actually keep your hands and your heart clean in that process and go, well, God, I'm willing to be wrong. And you make sure, like you say, you're not gossiping, you're honoring them in the way you go about it. I think that's bang on. Now, you mentioned something interesting there about trust and disappointment.
Yeah.
And this is one I want to know from you. Do you think you can still trust and follow leaders after they have disappointed you? Like, let's use Carl Lenz for an example.
Yeah.
Should people or anyone, if you've had a leader that's had an affair or you've had a leader that's had financial mismanagement, whatever it might be, can you still trust and follow leaders after they disappoint you?
Yeah. I think that's something that a lot of people probably do struggle with. It's like, well, you've done this wrong. How can I trust that anything else you say is correct? Or like, obviously you don't have authority in that if you failed in that area. I would say it's possible, but it's really, really hard. And you don't have to either. You don't. If there's a leader in your life that you feel has abused your trust or disappointed you, you don't actually have to go back there. It's up to you. But that's just like any pain from any person in our lives. If there's someone in your life that has abused your trust or disappointed you, you don't have to continue on in that relationship. You can literally just leave it. But it's up to you how you process it.
Sure, but then is that biblical?
Is it?
I don't know. I'm asking
Let me ask my pastor, who I trust and follow.
Yeah, what about David? Should people have followed David after he had an affair?
He repented.
Okay, so all you have to do is repent.
I think that's something important to know.
Okay.
If you've got someone who's committed a sin or done something that is sinful or unethical, and they continue on in it and they're willfully arrogant.
But what about if they repent?
If they repent and they start making adjustments and you can see in their life that they are, that's like trust. When someone hurts you, you go, okay, well, I want to trust you again. I want to rebuild this relationship that we have. So let's see what kind of actions you're taking. Oh, you're being more honest. You're taking what I'm saying into consideration. You're actually showing with your actions that you're going to gain that back.
Wouldn't you say that trust is only trust when you do disagree?
Yeah, but I think that's different in these cases.
Sure, what I'm saying though is, I'm not talking about I'm talking about someone who's a repentant leader and you're saying, but then they've got to earn your trust back. But I'm saying, isn't that the only time you are trusting them?
Oh, that's true, yeah. Yep, I see what you mean.
Before that, you were just in agreement with them.
Yeah.
Really, but now you've got to make the willful decision to trust them moving forward. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So trust is really only trust when you disagree. So can you still trust and follow leaders after they disappoint you? I mean, the biblical precedents would say yes.
Yeah.
The question is not whether you can trust them. The question is, will you trust them? The question is, and again, I agree, if they're a repentant leader, that's a totally different thing. If they're non-repentant, let's leave that alone. That's a whole other story. We're talking about a repentant leader that messed up. Well, Carl Lenz is a good example. Will we ever be able to trust Carl again?
Yeah.
Absolutely, yes. Does Carl Lenz, because of what's happened, and I know we're using him as an example, but it's happened with other leaders too, and I've seen it happen. And people will sometimes go, oh, that person made a wrong leadership decision over here, or wrong thing over there, wrong thing over here, therefore it negates all of their teaching. I just disagree with that, absolutely.
Yeah.
That I've made so many wrong decisions and I've made so many poor moral decisions that I'm glad haven't come out into the public light. At the end of the day, I learned from those. But if every sin from my past had been exposed far out, I would seem like I shouldn't be in leadership. Just like you would seem like if everything that you had ever done wrong was exposed, you would feel like you shouldn't be in anyone's leadership or decision making or public eye. Yeah. The point is, I think, that if there's a repentant heart and there's a desire to continue to get better, we've got to make a choice and a decision to trust them.
Yeah.
And really, even going back to what Shalom said before, I think it's a matter of actually don't put the person on the pedestal, put God on the pedestal. Yeah. God's using the person. Yeah. That person's demonstrating how we pursue God. That person's demonstrating the character that's needed. And also sometimes they've just got great teaching, great perspectives on things. So, I mean, I think you can, and maybe it's only because I am a leader that I'm saying this, and I'm like, I disappoint people. I want you to still trust me. I want you to still, follow me and know that I am deeply sorry when I disappoint people. But I think that's when trust kicks in.
Mhm.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I agree. It can be hard, especially because, like, it's just the process of pain. But then, well, who are you going to follow? Will we only look up to leaders who are perfect? Because there's none. Like, ultimately the Lord is our ultimate leader, but He's the only one who we should have the expectation of perfection on. Everyone else is little bit like, oh, well, you're human. Let's just remember that everyone has humanity, and we all have flaws.
It's true. Somebody showed me a quote from Billy Graham just recently that says, when you find a perfect church, don't join it. You'll only ruin it. When you find a perfect organization, don't join them. You'll only ruin them, So the truth is we're all faulted. We're all flawed. I think it is a decision making. Jaz, I can't believe it's like nearly 40 minutes already that we've been here. It has been a good one, a one that is, I think one that we need to hear is that leaders are imperfect, yes, but we should still hold them to a very high standard. Absolutely. That comes with part of being in what leadership is all about. I think it's important that we hold leaders accountable to those standards, and that when they fall and when they make mistakes, that we make a willful and honest decision to trust them. We get behind them, we support them, and we push them back into their position of leadership, which is where they should be, and we push them back into the position of having high standards and a high character. I encourage you, if you're listening to this and you need to confront somebody about something, and you need to confront a boss or a leader about something, do it with honor, do it well, and make sure that as you do it, that you keep your hands and heart clean. As Jaz says, don't gossip about it. Just go straight to them. It's tough, it's hard, but if they're the sort of leader that you're going to keep on following, they're going to handle it well. You're testament to that. You spoke to us at the start of the year, and you're still here, thankfully for us, all this time later. So, thanks again for joining us. Don't forget, you can join us every Sunday. We have church online, citypointchurch.com. And for those of us who are in the Ipswich area, on November 29th, we are having a COVID-safe worship event at church where we'll join together. If you're sick or in any way, shape, or form, make sure you stay home. But other than that, make sure you get there. It's going to be an awesome time of worship together. Yay. Thank you again for joining us. Don't forget, you can download all of our podcasts. All you got to do is search Simo Hoffman. You'll be able to see them all there. Thanks again, guys, and we will see you next time.
Bye.